This is Logan Thomas, tight end for the Washington Commanders, and you're listening to the Bestball Fantasy Podcast.
And welcome into episode 44 of the Bestball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bradley Salder, and tonight, special guest Matt Schauf, Draft Sharks, is joining me in a live Drafters Fantasy Bestball draft. Matt, how are you doing tonight? Welcome to the podcast.
I'm doing great. I got my last name pronounced correctly. I got Logan Thomas introing me. I'm about to draft in the middle of the evening portion of the East here. I won't call it middle of the night because it's not nearly late enough for those of us who have been through the young kids stages. That's not anywhere close to the middle of the night, right?
Twilight drafting, yeah? Hey, the lobby just opened. Here we go.
Oh, baby.
All right. So for those who are unfamiliar with Drafters Fantasy, this is the $20 Drafters Million NFL Basketball Championship, $250,000, and the winner is going to be drafted right in this room, Matt. It's $20 entry. You can use promo code BESTBELL to get a free entry for a first-time deposit into this Best Ball Championship tournament. It's full PPR. Start a quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, tight end, and a flex. It's a 20-round, 30-second timer. We're ready. I'm ready. Matt, it's full PPR, 12 teams, but it's a season-long accumulation of points, not like Underdog or a few other tournaments where there's a playoff setting. How does that change your strategy for a Drafters Fantasy Best Ball Championship draft tonight?
I love that aspect of this format because I think it truly then measures what team was the best for the year as opposed to which of the really good teams got lucky in the final 3 weeks. So it makes me draft it like I'm drafting a full season team and not look at stuff like week 17 correlations or playoff schedules or all that. I just want to put together the best fantasy football team. So I think it's purer to what we all started out playing, I think.
I agree. There's something about the week 17 boys that just it's a cult in a sense. Unfortunately, they don't have Underdog here in Michigan, so I've been held back from all of the week 17 correlations that would have been forced upon me in that setting. But here in Drafters, Matt, we were talking earlier off air about ideal draft position, and as we get started, you get the second pick, and I have the 7th pick. Christian McCaffrey's off the board. Who are you going with?
That's Cooper Kupp pretty easily for me. If I'm choosing first overall 10 times, then Cooper Kupp is at least 5 of those picks for me because I think if we look at the 3 guys here, let's separate it a little bit because Cooper Kupp and Jonathan Taylor were the 2 healthy ones last year who went crazy. And if you look at the things that they did to go crazy, Cooper Kupp's things are more repeatable. It's unlikely that he pulls all of those things together in one like he did last year again. He was a target hog. He had a good touchdown rate, but not an otherworldly touchdown rate. He had a very good catch rate, but not an otherworldly catch rate. So everything went absolutely as well as it could, but it was all repeatable things where he could be close to as good again. Jonathan Taylor had a really high touchdown rate, and that's very important to the way that he produced numbers last year. And that's the one category where you say it's probably coming down just from sheer luck. We're splitting hairs here, but that's what you do when you're talking about top picks. And then Christian McCaffrey, for me, is the top running back because I still think he has the higher ceiling in full PPR than Jonathan Taylor. So for me, Kupp versus Christian McCaffrey is just a matter of I expect to like the running backs better the next few turns than I will the wide receivers.
I agree. There have been some of the running backs that have been smashing lately. I probably won't be taking a Leonard Fournette, but that type of player and Lean Lenny, as he's been trending on Twitter lately, reported 245. He's definitely one. Javonte Williams at that 2-3 turn. Nick Chubb, maybe not in full PPR, but you can't deny the pure runner that Nick Chubb is. And if Deshaun Watson isn't suspended more than 8 games, that Browns offense could look a lot different than what maybe we're projecting right now.
For sure. My problem with Chubb is that he doesn't get quite the high workload. So certainly more interesting for best ball purposes because he has that huge game potential. The further we get from individual weeks mattering, the less interested I am, especially with that full reception scoring.
Now at pick 7, I was talking with you off air. I was not a fan of getting the 7th pick. And what do? I get the 7th pick, but luck fell my way. And both Travis Kelce and Derrick Henry were taken ahead of ADP, or at least seemingly ahead of ADP. Jamar Chase fell into my lap, and I thought that was a smash pick at 7. It was a choice, frankly, between Jamar Chase and Eckler, but I'll lean Jamar Chase in a 3 wide receiver build here.
Yeah, and I think that Jamar Chase is somebody that I'll like better there for best ball than I will for lineup setting. I think I would favor Austin Eckler for lineup setting because I think we're going to see huge peaks and valleys from Jamar Chase like we did last year, which ends up working out, and you're going to be starting him every week either way. But I think there is a little bit more potential for him to disappoint just relative to that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 draft position.
Absolutely. I did projections for Cincinnati, and Chase still is in that elite tier. But as you mentioned, lineup setting, you're still going to be setting Jamar Chase in your lineups. We're not getting cute, but in a full PPR, and we saw like the Cincinnati Bengals upgrade their offensive line. We saw spike weeks. So they have a tougher schedule. So you can imagine maybe some more shootouts instead of running the ball with Joe Mixon. That could play into it. Joe Mixon and Mike Evans are looking at me, and I'm going to lean Mike Evans here. I know that there's been some rumbling and tumbling about the Russell Gage and Julio Jones. I'm not buying into it. And here's my reason. Julio Jones over the last 2 seasons has decreased his wide receiver 1 rate by 10% or more. There's no other wide receiver in that to be doing that. He's on the downward trajectory. Those are rate-based stats, not, well, he was injured, blah, blah, blah. No, like he's been getting worse each of the last 2 years and pretty significantly. So I think it's still Mike Evans, despite Evans only getting, a 17% target share last season. I still don't mind Evans at that spot.
Yeah, and we say it all the time, and it's a cliche at this point, but it's easier to bet on a couple of guys like the first 2 wide receivers that you took in a format where you're just taking the best of them and you can play around with the rest of it. I'm not super worried about Mike Evans either because he's going to get plenty to be able to pay off here. Does he not have the same kind of ultimate target ceiling as some other guys going in this range? Sure, that's fair, but there's plenty to like with him where I don't think you have to worry too much.
And I felt like I would have had to go Fournette. Like I was thinking about Fournette at that spot, but I'm not going with Andrews. I think that's a trap. Like I'd rather have Andrews like at the end of the 2nd round or beginning of the 3rd round. I think Andrews and Pitts are closer than Andrews and Kelce. And I was not going to draft Joe Mixon in a full PPR. I think that Chris Evans just gets more involved, and Evans is a better pass blocker and pass catcher. So I think that he'll be playing more 3rd downs.
Yeah, and I got to admit, straying from the topic now, that I got behind on the clock a little bit at the beginning of my pick. Javonte Williams was an auto pick because he just happened to be at the top of the board. That is absolutely not who I wanted to take there. And I was scrambling to see.
Sorry, I apologize. I need to be a better host.
I mean, I've done enough of these that I should be looking ahead and queuing guys and setting myself up to get somebody that I'm okay with. That's the lesson to you if you think out there, it's easy to just talk and draft at the same time. Make sure you're paying attention to the part that really matters in the team that you're building. I mean, there's upside to Javonte Williams. Hopefully it doesn't kill me, but I am a little disappointed that's who I ended up with. I'm not,
then
not
you came back around
to show people who to take there.
Fair enough. And no, if you were to pick, Kamara was on the board there, Pitts was on the board. Would you have taken James Conner instead in the 2nd round?
I'm okay with Connor there. He doesn't go there. He's going in round 3, so that keeps me from grabbing him. It shouldn't. I should just take him. He was at the top of my Draft Sharks war room there among running backs, so I probably should have just gone with that, especially because I'm trying to talk through it and then not lose out on the pick. And I think it is important to not worry too much about ADP. It's not like I'm talking about a running back who would be there at my round 4 turn. So if it's just like getting that cute, I say go ahead and take him. I also considered Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins there at the end. That was where I was looking at, and actually Tyreek Hill was off the board. So I would have just found out that he was not there when I searched him. I was trying to search T. Higgins when the board was like, nope, you took too long. Now you're getting Javonte Williams because of it. I'm honestly surprised that Javonte Williams is sitting that high in ADP on here, because I don't think that he belongs in round 2, especially with that full PPR scoring. I would absolutely take either Alvin Kamara or James Conner over him.
Interesting. Yeah. Kamara, it seems like his situation is, while it's not clear, it's clear that it's probably not going to happen during the NFL year. That seems to be the way the courts are trending and discovery, all of that. Drew Davenport has talked time and again about how the Kamara situation hasn't evolved and it's just been slowly progressing, and there's not anticipation that he'll be expecting a suspension during the year. So getting Kamara at the end of round 2 probably looks pretty good.
Yeah, to me, right now, it's either Kamara is not suspended this year or the video comes out showing what he did, because the court case certainly does not seem to be progressing to the degree that it's going to be resolved anytime soon. And the NFL has showed us over and over again that it's not going to act until it has to. So I'm not expecting a suspension for Kamara unless we get that video out. So with that in mind, he similar to Connor, I was like, okay, maybe I'll take Kamara here. And then I started looking at the wide receivers, and that was when the clock ran out on me. So Kamara probably would have been the pick had I made that selection there. I have him plenty of other places. It's not going to kill me. My one question on Kamara is whether we're starting to see decline, because last year there was some loss of efficiency from him. He got a ton of touches, so it didn't ultimately matter that much for his fantasy production. But the question is, did his efficiency come down because his team stunk for most of the year, or is he starting to decline because he's not a workhorse? He's had a lot of touches and it's just getting to that point in his career.
That was a career high in rushes last year. I think it was 240 in fewer games than his previous career high in rushes. So I would lean toward he wasn't used well. Like, they didn't have Mark Ingram until the second half of the season. Taysom Hill was awkwardly running around there for a while. Jameis Winston went down with the ACL. A lot of things just didn't go the Saints' way last year, and I wonder if Kamara just got lost in the game plan. So I think you're on the clock.
Oh yeah, don't worry, I'm paying attention this time.
So I think that maybe we've seen a little bit of decline, but if he gets back to catching balls out of the backfield, like he had a career low in receptions and targets, that's a player who needs to be utilized correctly, in my opinion. And we've seen him not be used correctly. It's possible that he returns to more fantasy usefulness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was doing the searching thing again and not loving anybody that came up. So I wound up with DK Metcalf at that pick. I don't love DK Metcalf. I would prefer Allen Robinson to him. I just wasn't ready to start with 2 Rams wide receivers in the first 4 rounds, especially with the questions about Matt Stafford's arm. Maybe I would have gone ahead and taken Brandon Cooks if I had thought that he was going to get picked at that turn. But that's a sign to maybe ignore ADP and go ahead and take a guy that you like. I'll do that with Adam Thielen here because I think it's plenty late enough for him to make sense. And he showed us the ultimate ceiling to pay off in this range, even if it's ahead of where he would ultimately go.
Yeah, Allen Robinson is one of those. I just finished doing Rams projections, and I was kind of disappointed with what I saw in the Rams projection. Now, maybe I need to you decrease a little bit of Higbee, but Higbee last year had 16+% median target share. And Robinson was about 20% for the Bears. It still was a respectable amount. I still expect Cooper Kupp to be in the 30%, but for Robinson to be drafted at the end of the 4th round, I understand the spike week potential, but we also saw him play poorly. And not just, he was checked out from the Bears, but he just didn't play well. I'm on the clock, so that's why I'm stuttering here.
I know how that goes. But yeah, so that's the thing is last year went so poorly that it makes it tough to just disregard what happened last year. Now, the factors at work here are he was dealing with injuries, so that, of course, factored in somehow. It's absolutely impossible for any of us to know how much. that was a bad offense, which factors in some. Of course, it didn't kill Darnell Mooney, so that's the argument against that aspect. The coaching staff wasn't great. How much of it was him? How much is it that he might decline? I would be more concerned about whether he's going to rebound this year if the Rams weren't so sure that he's going to rebound. And so to me, it's important to not lose what you think of a player just because of what the teams think of a player, because they will also be wrong about guys and we will be right about some guys. But if I'm wrestling with my reaction to a guy's season last year and I'm watching a team that's just making terrific moves and success after success on the field, and they're like, yeah, we think he's going to be fine. We're going to pay him $15 million a year. And now that he's here, we love him even more. I'm like, all right, I believe that Allen Robinson's back. And if he lets me down from an end of the fourth round price, I don't think he's going to crash and burn from there. He might be a little bit disappointing. I think as far as his role, like the floor that I think we can work with is combining what Odell Beckham and Robert Woods did last year, because they were nice enough to actually have their weeks line up like perfectly. Like Robert Woods went down, Odell Beckham's in. And if you took their target share and their production from there, it was like wide receiver 26 to 24, 23, depending on your scoring format. So I think that's a reasonable expectation for Robinson here.
So you're telling me because he's getting Marcus Valdes-Scantling money that he's gonna he's gonna produce? No, I think that there's definitely an optimism about the Rams. Stafford is a clear upgrade over Justin Fields, and the coaching and the money. There's a lot of narratives that point toward Allen Robinson rebound season, and a 22% share in the Rams offense is going to be fantasy useful, but I still think that it's hard to ignore that red flag from Chicago last year, or at least like I'll draft Robinson, but it's a pill that I'm swallowing.
Yeah. And to be fair, I don't think he's a smash pick there either. I think he's more the guy I dislike the least among what I'm choosing from. And I wouldn't take him every time over Terry McLaurin. If McLaurin made it there, he went the pick right before mine, so he wasn't in the mix there. I like Brandon Cooks a little bit better. I wouldn't be shocked if either of those two outscored each other. I probably should have just taken Brandon Cooks because he's my favorite. I think he has both floor and ceiling there. And the hangup is he hasn't been going that early, so I should be able to wait around the turn and get him. And as we can see, that did not work here. So perhaps I should have gone ahead and taken Cooks. Metcalf is uncomfortable to take. I wish that I had gotten T. Higgins at that Williams-Connor turn, like Connor in round 2 and Higgins in round 3, so that then I could not be looking wide receiver so much at that Metcalf spot.
All right. Well, I'll recap my draft so far. I've gone a little bit unorthodox, but it's okay. You got to be a little different here in these drafters' fantasy rooms. In round 3, I went Michael Pittman as my third wide receiver. I've been bigger on Pittman. I think that his range of outcomes includes a low-end wide receiver 1. And we've seen how Matt Ryan can sustain 2 wide receiver 1s in his Atlanta offenses with lots of yards. And even though Julio didn't get his touchdowns, Calvin Ridley got the touchdowns. I don't see a big number 2 wide receiver stepping up immediately. Is it going to be Alec Pierce? Is it going to be Paris Campbell? Is it going to be one of the tight ends that really comes along? Is Moe Ali Cox going to take a step forward? I don't think so. Is it going to be Nyheim Hines? Maybe Nyheim Hines is the right answer. I think all of the questions behind Michael Pittman strengthen my belief that he's going to be back-end wide receiver 1 from a week-to-week basis. And to have him as my wide receiver 3, I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I would agree on being happy with that. And we'll see exactly where that goes, but it's a fine situation for him. And he certainly fared well for us last year, better than we could have reasonably expected, I think, given how things were around him.
And then after I went Breece Hall, I've been loving getting Breece Hall at pick 42, smash in the 4th round. I'm not worried about Michael Carter. I think he does everything that Michael Carter does, but better. And looking at over the last 7-8 years, the first running back off of the rookie board, the NFL draft has been on average like the running back 8, and has finished as the running back 8 like 6 of those 8 years or something, like at least running back 8 6 of those 8 years. So with all the measurables, all the things going right, on an offense that we expect to be better. I don't think the Jets are going to be all that great, but they've got to be better. We're going to go with Russell Gage. And I think that it's Breece Hall who's going to be one of the big smashes in the fourth round. And I'm pretty confident about that in the fourth.
Yeah, I agree. I really like Breece Hall. I've even been talking him up beyond where my coworkers have so far. So he might, if he does something for me, either in terms of camp buzz reports or the preseason, maybe I'll get him pushed up the rankings a little further. But I agree. I'm not sure exactly what the knock is on him, because if it's team, I mean, we've seen guys outperform their teams, and a running back is in a good spot where he's going to be getting touches, whether they're good or whether they're bad. And for Breece Hall specifically, if they're really bad, he's going to get targets. If they're better than expected, he gets more scoring opportunities. I guess maybe some of the hesitation with him is people like Michael Carter off of last year. I think it's overrating Michael Carter to downgrade Breece Hall because he's there. Michael Carter was a day 3 pick. He was fine last year. He was a touch share guy at UNC. I don't think that he keeps Breece Hall off the field. I think that the comp for that specific situation is if you went into last year worried about Jonathan Taylor getting enough catches because of Nyheim Hines, that's worrying about Michael Carter keeping touches away from Breece Hall. I'm not saying that Breece Hall is as good as Jonathan Taylor, but maybe he is. I don't know. We'll see. There were certainly some models that were putting him close to Jonathan Taylor in talent. But what we do know is he's very talented. He tested great. He was highly productive in college. He was highly productive as both a runner and a receiver throughout college from the beginning. So I just don't see anything to dislike about Hall. And in round 4, he's going late enough that you're not going out on a limb to take him.
Now, after round 4, I took Herbert and Burrow rounds 5 and 6.
That.
I usually don't go early quarterbacks ever, much less 2 early quarterbacks, but Herbert usually goes in like the early 4th round in these drafts. So to get him at pick 55, that was just a value pick at that spot. There was no correlation. It's just when are you ever going to see Herbert 10 picks after ADP, especially when you have 2 pass catchers, Williams and Allen, going round 3. I would have expected him to get stacked. There were a couple opportunities for him to get stacked there, and he just didn't. I'll take him naked. That's fine. And then Joe Burrow to stack with Jamar Chase. And I probably won't take another quarterback for the rest of the draft because they don't have overlapping bye weeks. So I'll be fine there. And I like the upside that both of those quarterbacks offer on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I'm up making my second pick around the turn here, so trying to decide, trying not to get timed out. I think I'll just take a share of somebody that I haven't drafted much yet, and it's not that I love Chris Olave, but like I said, I haven't drafted him a whole lot yet, so it seems like a time to take a shot. It's not far away from where his ADP is. He's my 5th wide receiver. I want the spikes from him. I'm not otherwise making a strong case for him. Chase Claypool, I'll make a stronger case for because I did take him a little bit ahead of ADP. I've had other turns in this draft show me that if a guy's close enough, then don't get cute and just go ahead and take the guy you like. And I like Chase Claypool because he performed better on an efficiency level than Deontay Johnson last year, better in yards after catch over expected. He should have a much better quarterback situation for downfield throwing this year to try to maximize his potential in the area where he is better than Deontay Johnson. The question, I think the biggest question with him is the maturity thing. And it sounds from what Mike Tomlin says, like the coaching staff is more hopeful in him growing up and encouraged by signs that he has at least realized the issue and is trying to get better more than they are skeptical of him as a player because of it. So when you combine that with the talent and the opportunity, I like Chase Claypool down in this range. He's been a specific target for me, regardless of how I started out my draft.
And his role first day out of training camp, a power slot. It reminds you almost of if Michael Thomas out of the slot, big athletic wide receiver. And Mitchell Trubisky, he's had, if we were reckon back to 2015, 2016, 2017 seasons when Trubisky was the starter for the Bears, he boomed and busted. And when he boomed big. And maybe it's not Deontay Johnson who booms. Maybe it's instead Chase Claypool or one of my favorite late round picks, George Pickens. But I think that all three of them are going to be very interesting wide receiver picks. And I like that pick for Claypool. Also looking at the rest of your draft so far, you took Thielen, and I love the Thielen pick. One of my favorites there, pick 50. Maybe he's a little high for me, but
A little high for me.
I love Thielen. But let's
I was definitely breaking glass in case of emergency there. I was like, I don't know. I don't like anything at running back. I don't want a tight end here. It's too early for a quarterback. I don't love any of the wide receivers. I'm just going to take the guy that scores touchdowns every time he's on the field. And I don't even care what his ADP is right now because I have 4 seconds left.
There we go. That's fair. You went Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 88, just recently taken off the physically unable to perform list. Clyde Edwards-Helaire buying the dip and actually that's round 6. I don't know if that's so much buying a dip, but for a split moment there was a dip to be bought, I suppose.
There were certainly people cackling about him going on the pup list, and then a day later, he's off pup. He's good to go.
Gotcha. And then Hawkinson there at, let's see, the 702. A lot earlier than Schultz or Goddard. So you made a choice, a pretty significant choice of Hawkinson over those two tight ends. Make the case. Why Hawkinson?
I've taken Goddard a lot more, so I already have lots of Goddard. I think that there's a higher reception ceiling for Hawkinson. Honestly, this was another spot where I was struggling on the clock, and I'm less familiar with this specific ADP than I am in other spots. I think it's late enough for Hawkinson. I have him ahead of Dalton Schultz because I think he's a better bet for target share than Dalton Schultz is. Am I betting heavily on one finishing ahead of the other? No. And I have to look real quick to see. Dak Prescott's probably off the board, so there's not the stacking potential there. It's not so much a statement pick on Hawkinson as this is my choice for, I don't know, I guess it's floor for what was available.
My projection for Hawkinson still is, let me pull it up, 19% target share. I'll take 120 targets, right. 6 touchdowns. That's fine. That's fine for a tight end in full PPR.
And now I'm actually prepared for this pick. So I'm just going to go ahead and stack Kirk Cousins.
Oh, beautiful.
Decent ADP with Adam Thielen. Now I can minimize those touchdowns that I'm getting when Adam Thielen, my safety blanket, hits the field.
One of my favorite quarterbacks to be drafting, I think it's Cousins and Matt Ryan are my 2 favorite quarterbacks to be taking in this format, just because of they're going so much later, but the pieces that you can stack with them are so much really easy to stack with. You can stack Cousins with Thielen or Jefferson, and then add KJ Osborne late and Irv Smith late, and even correlate with Alexander Madison like you did here at the 1102.
Yeah, so there's ceiling. I just talked about floor with Hawkinson, and I even almost choked on the word floor in a tournament draft, talking about Hawkinson there. So Madison is purely ceiling. Obviously, I have 3 running backs that I expect to do well, and I have to draft this as though Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to smash from his spot. And I do think, I don't think you have to bet on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the talent now, to see the potential for him to smash fantasy-wise from even the 6th round, even if that's earlier than where he tends to go here. He should be the top pass catcher among Chiefs running backs. He should be the top runner among Chiefs running backs. I don't think that Jerick McKinnon is very good, and the Chiefs barely used him during the regular season last year. Ronald Jones was not very good for the Bucs. They let him walk, and then he barely got anything on the open market. So I'm not going to overrate his presence. Again, I'm as concerned about the way CEH started his career as anybody, but the opportunity is still there for him. So I should expect those 3 running backs to do well. That way I can have Madison there, and if Dalvin Cook goes down, then all of a sudden I've got an RB1.
And we've seen Madison time and again step in for Dalvin Cook when he's been out as a back end mid-pack running back 1. So right on there with the ceiling. A few recap picks for me. Russell Gage was a round 7 pick, and at 79, he was 15 spots after his ADP, just after the Julio Jones news. But Russell Gage, 22% target share last season on a bad Atlanta offense, still one of the more efficient players And I've been a Russell Gage truther for the last 3 years. So finally he's getting his opportunity, and then his ADP explodes. And I'm like, yes. And then Julio Jones joins and everyone's like, oh, Russell Gage truthers, where you at? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I've been here the whole time.
Yeah. So where are you at on the Russell Gage versus Julio Jones thing now that this has happened? Because that was certainly an argument that we were having behind the curtain at Draft Sharks yesterday and trying to set our rankings.
I haven't done the Tampa Bay projections to include Julio Jones yet, but would I have Julio Jones or DJ Chark?
Before we even get to that, like when you do sit down to redo the Bucks, is there any chance that you're going to give Julio Jones more targets per game than Russell Gage?
No.
That's my thought as well.
Like Julio Jones is the quote came out, and I was going to tweet out earlier before this, it's just going to be the Rob Gronkowski targets. It's just going to be the big tight end zone, red zone. They need 12 yards and he's going to run middle of the field, and no one can take down the athlete that is Julio Jones, right? Sparingly specialist. Russell Gage, he was brought in massive contract for what? Yeah. It was not a small little dinky, like a 1 year, $3 million prove it deal, like a Jamison Crowder deal. This was Russell Gage coming to the Bucs. Tom Brady wanted him, and there was a specific role for him that he's been prepping for this whole year. Now it's July 27th. Julio Jones finally signs after coming off of regressive years. No, give me all Russell Gage at discount now.
Yeah, so we've got this player aging table that goes by position that's in the background on draftsharks.com now. It runs our dynasty projections, which we added to the site this year. So looking at that aging table, we've got Julio Jones heading into year 12, which for a wide receiver, historically, you get a guy who is producing at 48% of his peak. We've got Russell Gage, who is entering year 5. That is 100%. That is when a wide receiver is peaking. So we've got a 26-year-old wide receiver versus a 33-year-old wide receiver who, traditionally the older guy does about half of what the younger guy does in terms of that player's expected production. Now, the money, you want to say money's not everything, but if a team decided to pay $20 million guaranteed on a 3-year deal to Russell Gage, when it could have waited, signed Jarvis Landry, signed Julio Jones, just
Cole Beasley.
Will Fuller's still out there, Cole Beasley. They knew who was out there at that point. They could have waited and just seen what was there for them. They didn't have to go get Russell Gage, but they did. So clearly they like him. Just all of the signs to me, maybe we'll get different words from the coaches in Tampa Bay, but all the signs to me say expect Russell Gage to be the wide receiver 3. And if Chris Godwin's ready to go, then Julio Jones is just the 4th guy. It's just how it's stacking up.
In round 8, I took another priority free agent ad, Chase Edmonds, the first running back signed in free agency. And I don't understand the Chase Edmonds hate, honestly. He's been a back-end running back too in a part-time role. And if there's even the chance that he gets 50%, 45% of the carries, we're talking about a player who has back-end running back 1 upside in a full PPR setting. Like, I get that there's concerns about, Sony Michel might get 60% of the carries, blah, blah, blah. And follow the money, follow the priority, follow the timeline. And also, all of the targets can't just go to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in this offense. It's going to be having to include other players, including Chase Edmonds.
And we especially know that Mike McDaniel comes from a system that doesn't overpay for running backs. This is the first time we're seeing him as a head coach, so who knows exactly how he operates. But from what we do know, we should assume that he does Chase Edmonds because they did pay for him. Yeah, I think as long as you're not over-investing, I like Chase Edmonds, especially in a format where you're getting that full reception scoring and you don't have to decide when to start him. I think he'll get a little bit trickier when we're setting our lineups and we have to decide whether to put him in there, but he's still going to be going at a value range.
And then right after that, I took Kareem Hunt. Once again, full PPR, Kareem Hunt, double-digit target shares. But what's interesting to me is last year, he had a higher running back 1 rate than Nick Chubb in full PPR. And that's what you're like, we're drafting Nick Chubb at the back end of the second round, maybe beginning of the third round. Kareem Hunt's going in round 9. That's too late.
Yeah, I think he's underpriced this year. I think that people didn't get what they were hoping for from him last year, and now they're like, he's not that good anymore. Plus, the other thing that people are weighing too much is the possibility that he's not on the team this year. And I haven't seen lately people talking about Kareem Hunt potentially getting cut, and that's a good thing because I thought that
If
was
anything,
absurd.
it's swung toward Dearness Johnson being cut now.
And so that's the thing is if you're weighing in the possibility that Kareem Hunt moves on to another team, that doesn't downgrade him for me. That's an upgrade because if he goes somewhere, it's going to be another team trading for him. It's probably somewhere that has more opportunity immediately available and that wants him. So I think that there's nothing but positive avenues here. We've already seen in Cleveland, he'll get plenty of touches even when Nick Chubb is healthy. If Deshaun Watson's out, there should be even more touches going to the running backs. Out of the whole offense, it's going to be a worse offense and the touches will be lower value, but Kareem Hunt will get the ball more often. Then, of course, there's the handcuff upside if Chubb goes down. So I've been surprised that Hunt has not climbed at all.
Yeah, I'm surprised. It's befuddling to me in a full PPR. In round 10, I took Tyler Boyd to stack with Burrow, correlate with Chase. And if there's ever a wide receiver handcuff, we've seen Tyler Boyd have 2 1,000-yard seasons under Andy Dalton as the quarterback. If Higgins or Chase goes down, I got sniped on Gerald Everett there. Are you kidding me? At any rate, no, we're not going to go Matt Ryan. I'm almost set right there.
It would be an okay range for Matt Ryan. I don't know exactly what number.
I already have Herbert and Burrow. I'm okay.
That's true. Yeah. I forgot about the Herbert Burrow double stack there, double tap in 2 straight rounds. So I agree. I'm not taking the third quarterback. Who'd you end up with? Corey Davis. I think it's fine to take Corey Davis at that level. It's something to get excited about him, but we also don't know who's going to lead that wide receiver core in targets.
Could be Davis.
I wouldn't
be Elijah Moore.
Corey Davis, but if it is, would that be a shocking development? I don't think so.
No, not at all. He's paid to be playing the X, so at any rate, we talked about Madison. I'll talk about Nyheim Hines for a second. Full PPR once again. We're getting Hines in round 11. And we've seen some of the spike weeks, and if there's ambiguity in the pass catching role, the Colts have been in talks with Hilton. This is what they did last year, though. Nyheim Hines might still have a pretty significant pass catching role, even though I don't project him there. It could be a lot higher, more like previous years.
It should be. The quarterback change should be better for his receptions and targets than Carson Wentz was. Carson Wentz wants to throw downfield. He scrambles around and looks for guys downfield. Matt Ryan is more likely to check it down. And the coaches have said, expect a lot more from Nyheim Hines this year. They might be trying to scheme it in more. They did just pay him early last season. So we have to assume that they want him to get it more there. I guess we'll see where it goes, but I think we expect some more, and certainly in full PPR is more interesting. I think he's not going to be a guy that I'll be taking a whole lot when I'm setting the lineup, though, because you're not going to want to start Nyheim Hines, even if I think there's some carry upside if Jonathan Taylor goes down, but it's not exciting. And I think somebody else probably gets some of those touches as well.
Jared just jumped in. Context matters with those aging curves. 48% of Jones' peak PPR would be 178. Gage's career high is 175.5. To be fair, though, Russell Gage's career high, I'm assuming it was last season, he missed 3 or 4 games. It's fine. Push back. It's okay, Jared. Okay.
That's what I was arguing with on the other night. It
doesn't surprise me.
I'm like, guys, they just paid this guy a bunch of money and now they signed Julio Jones. It's like everybody sees the name Julio Jones and they're like, yeah, but it's Julio. It's like, how do I even argue with that? Yes, it's Julio Jones. It's a 33-year-old version. It's just not the same. We'll see how that ends up.
Fair enough. Thanks for crashing it, Jared. Appreciate you. So after that, you and I both took tight ends in round 12, Mike Gesicki and Pat Freiermuth. Gesicki is not someone that I'm targeting in like a redraft, set your lineup type of format, but in best ball, yeah, give me Mike Gesicki. He's had, I think, one of the top 5 spike weeks among all tight ends. taking a step back, his rate at which he gets a tight end 1 week was like 5th highest last season. So getting Gesicki, I think that's fine in a best ball, but in a redraft league, I'm not as keen on taking Gesicki, especially at that price. You took Freiermuth, though. Freiermuth was buoyed by touchdowns last season. What do you expect from the Pittsburgh offense? You've taken Claypool and Freiermuth now.
Yeah, and that the reason I lean toward Freiermuth there is for some stacking. Again, I didn't love my options, so I decided to take him there, and maybe we'll add to that later and see if we can maximize the potential. And we'll talk about it when we get to that point, because that is a big part of why. But I think there's room for him to have a significant role, and somebody's going to score touchdowns, and he's going late enough that it's okay. I'm not specifically targeting Freiermuth, but as part of the overall structure of this team, he fits for potential upside. After that, I got a couple of wide receivers, and KJ Osborne. Is that getting to be too much of the Vikings now? I don't think so, because
Nope.
I don't have
too much Vikings. Never enough, man.
Right. So, and that's the thing is, a lot of years you might say that's a lot to rely on in the Vikings passing game. This should be a new Vikings offense where we've got the OC from last year's Rams, who were the team in the league that ran the most 3 wide receiver sets. Now we go to the Vikings, who have been a 1980s offense, and we should get a lot more of that 3 wide receiver set. We should get more of KJ Osborne on the field, even when Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson are healthy. So I'll look to steal some of those spike weeks. We saw that KJ Osborne is capable of doing that. And obviously there's the handcuff upside if either of the top 2 wideouts goes down, to give him opportunity. And again, I already had the quarterback, so it's easier to make a case for him. Van Jefferson, he's basically KJ Osborne for the Rams. He has showed it to us already, is the key difference between them, but he's got that double handcuff upside. I think with Cooper Kupp already in my lineup, I don't have Matthew Stafford, but if the passing game is terrific again, then I'm getting some Rams stacking upside without having to have the quarterback there.
Yeah, I like your pick of KJ Osborne. I think the Vikings are going to be very similar to the Rams, so you've seen that connection. I like that they're essentially the same player, but you have the spike weeks on 2 what we expect to be pretty pass heavy offenses, and the wide receiver 3 could step up and have a few more spike weeks if one of the starters goes down. So like if Allen Robinson doesn't produce, or if Adam Thielen still struggles with his ankle, those players could be pretty valuable. I went with Kenneth Gain around 13, pass catching running back. There's been some rumblings about him taking over as the running back 1, but I'm still leaning Miles Sanders is getting the majority of carries, even if he's not going to get the majority of catches. But we saw some spike weeks from Kenneth Gain. He had a couple top 24, even one top 12 week, I think, last season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love the upside in the player. We'll see exactly what the team thinks of him going forward. There's no special value to the pick I just made, so we'll just go beyond that. But yeah, I really liked Kenneth Gain, the prospect. I didn't love that he lasted until round 5. And then I loved that Philly had him immediately involved, where he was getting not only touches, but touches near the goal line with the help of Miles Sanders. Then I hated that when Miles Sanders went down, Kenneth Gainwell
went away too.
Boston Scott and Jordan Howard. So I'm at the I don't know what to make of him point right now.
At round 13 in full PPR, his prospect profile was one of the best pass catching running backs in the rookie class. So maybe they start tailoring a little bit more to the personnel. That's what we've been hearing out of Philly anyways. Like the AJ Brown love has been there. The Dallas Goedert love has been there. So I think Sirianni even came in with a Jalen Hurts shirt for training camp yesterday or today. So I think there's more optimism about Philly. I like one part of that offense. You mentioned Corey Davis. I came back around and took J.D. McKissick, also a pass-catching running back, one of the running backs who I think he's one of 5 to have a 10% target share each of the last couple seasons. So in full PPR, once again, I'm just targeting pass-catching running backs or who I project to be
Mhm.
at this spot.
Yeah, and I think both of those guys have plenty of week-to-week upside here, and I absolutely agree that the upside is there with Gain if they do get him more involved. We're talking about running backs. I took Raheem Mostert was the guy I glossed over. Like maybe he is the primary complement for Chase Edmonds. Maybe he plays 1.5 games and explodes because I have no idea. But so at this point in the draft, he's like the boom bust 5th running back. I don't particularly care about him, but among the guys that were still around. Before that, I had a few picks where one, I had to talk myself out of Evan Ingram because I've taken Evan Ingram a lot is one factor. It was also just too early to be my 3rd tight end. And maybe I should have tried harder to get that. No, so Trevor Lawrence was off the board before I got to the Pat Freiermuth pick. So a while back, I was hoping that it was going to be a Trevor Lawrence, Evan Ingram stack before it got to that turn in round 12. So once that went away, that was part of the genesis for, okay, let's take Pat Freiermuth and we'll keep building this Pittsburgh thing. And then round 14 was just too early to take that 3rd tight end, given that I took TJ Hockenson in round 7. So that's one of those spots where I have to, if you came into fantasy drafting single teams to win single leagues, then you want to just get the best players. And if there are players that you love at this point, you take him and you say, I think he's going to have a great season. But if I'm building this roster to beat a whole field of other teams, I have to think more about how I'm structuring that team. And where I took Hockenson, I need him to be really good. So if he's really good, then a 14th round tight end 3 is just not a good pick for me, regardless of what I think of that player. So I ended up, that was the Van Jefferson pick. Back around Mac Jones, I was hoping that there would be a little bit more stackability with him among the remaining receivers. It hasn't come my way in that direction yet, so we'll see. But I think Mac Jones, at least on his own, has a bit more upside than the other passers who were still around him on the board at that stage.
I agree. Mac Jones way over Zach Wilson. I'm sorry. Like, as much as we like to project the freshman to sophomore, 1st to 2nd year leap for quarterbacks, Zach Wilson was really bad last year in a lot of respects. But what was even worse, and I mentioned this, I'll take a step back. Josh Larkey, friend of the podcast, Josh Larkey, director of analytics, or he does director of fantasy and betting, I think, for the 33rd team now. He posted his FFPC Pros versus Joe's board last night, and he said that he drafted Zach Wilson, and I put a big red X next to Zach Wilson's name in a reply, and he's like, why do you hate Zach Wilson? I said, well, he was bad for a lot of reasons, but the bigger concern I have for Zach Wilson is the coaching. The Jets were like 6th in pass rate, but were near dead last in play action. And that's where Zach Wilson succeeds. He gets the secondary to bite. And if you look at his play action and his stats against man coverage, he's one of the best in the NFL. But the coaches don't put him in a position to do that. Mm-hmm. And I can't, there's been no coaching changes for the Jets. They just added Garrett Wilson and a couple tight ends. I don't imagine that that's going to make the difference. Speaking of New York Jets tight end, give me Tyler Conklin over CJ Uzomah for what it's worth. But what we saw was change of personnel, not changing coaching. And so I am concerned that they're going to just continue to misuse Zach Wilson, and all of his flaws are going to continue to be exposed.
Yeah, I would say my one counterpoint there is we've had 1 year of those guys leading, and I think that you don't want to ignore what you saw in that 1 year, because maybe that's just the tendency, but there's some benefit of the doubt. Like, maybe they are smart and they realize what they didn't do right last year, that they could do better this time around. I'm unexcited about Zach Wilson. There's no reason, I think, to get excited about him at this point, but I don't know. I guess I'm not totally forgetting about them. And I think I'm more optimistic for the talent that is there, at least, than I am worried about the coaches screwing everything up.
Or continuing to screw everything up. Does Zach Wilson plus Garrett Wilson plus Elijah Moore plus Corey Davis plus Breece Hall negate what issues we might have with the coaching. That remains to be seen. But we're getting into near this last round, Matt, and this is like the last couple rounds are the types of rounds where you want to start differentiating yourself. Take a player who is not drafted, but that you feel high on and that you need to fill in your lineup. So I'm going to take a wide receiver here that I know is not going to be drafted in a lot of places, but has some upside. And that's the type of strategy that's going to differentiate you from the field. Is if you are one of a 1%, a 5%, a 3% drafter of a particular player, like I'm thinking between Deontay Hardy, Emir Smith-Marset, and Quintez Cephas. Like those are the types of players that, like, I'm going to go with Cephas here just because we've seen him play well in the Amon-Ra St. Brown role. He might get traded because there's a glut of wide receivers buried. He has played well in the past. The only thing that held him back last year was, I think, a fractured collarbone. And he plays really, really hard. And maybe he's the one who earns a role in Detroit. So
you got the training camp hype video today too.
Oh, really? I missed out on that, but let's go Quintez Cephas.
Yeah, it's a single play, probably from one of their reporters, but I did see him pop up and it was like, is it Quintez Cephas season? It's like, hey, yes. Why not? It's everybody's season if they make one big play right now. I'm mad because somebody just took Tyquan Thornton, and I was about to take my first ever Tyquan Thornton to go with that Mac Jones share from earlier. I'll go away from that, and now I'm deciding right here in that vein that you were talking about between Nelson Aguilar, who would go with Mac Jones and is still on that team and is still getting paid a good bit of money, or Khalil Shakir. And I think because of the Mac Jones factor, I'll go ahead with Nelson Aguilar because there's a shorter path for him paying off for me than Khalil Shakir with the Bills. I also took Jonnu Smith last time, and that's not somebody that I had taken at all. So that's I kind of alluded to the Pittsburgh thing before. So I guess let's look at that. And when I had to go away from that Jaguars plan where I was hoping it was going to be Trevor Lawrence and Evan Ingram, I took Pat Freiermuth thinking I already have Chase Claypool. I was already considering Mitchell Trubisky as a late draft third QB because if he starts for even half plus of the season, then there's a shot that he gives me 2 to 3 starter weeks. And I'll take that from my QB3, especially if I have his highest upside wide receiver, I think, in terms of weekly upside. So now I've got both of those guys. If Trubisky sticks around for a while, I get some touchdowns from those guys. We'll see what happens. New England, like I said, the QB was getting thin, and I liked Mac Jones for upside and for stackability beyond that. It didn't work out quite the way I was hoping. I was hoping I would get a shot at some of the larger named Patriots pass catchers, but Jonnu Smith there at the end of the draft, missed out on Tyquan Thornton, but I took Nelson Aguilar. So that's the differentiating thing where it's not crazy to find opportunities for Jonnu Smith and Nelson Aguilar. And they then increase the value of Mac Jones, who was a player that I was not excited to draft when I took him.
And I was surprised you didn't consider Emir Smith-Marset at that spot.
That I think would be a little bit too much Vikings because if Emir Smith-Marset pays off, it probably means that KJ Osborne is not.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going against my own values right there. Or Adam Thielen. One of those two guys is probably disappointing to let that happen.
Maybe it's Justin Jefferson and then it hurts your Kirk Cousins. Who knows? But all right, we'll recap the draft here real quick. I went with a 2-6-9-3 build. Obviously very strong at quarterback, lots of pass catching running backs. My top 3 wide receivers are really, really good. And then I'm just hoping that someone else fills in. And then I went with 3 tight ends, all different bye weeks. So hopefully someone spikes from that spot. Gesicki, Austin Hooper's getting some love in the preseason. I also don't think Hooper's washed at all with Anthony Firkser moving on and the Titans probably in need of playmakers. We don't know if Robert Woods is going to be ready for week 1. Treylon Burks probably is going to be good to start, but we've also seen rookies, even if they're first round rookies, start slow during those first weeks, even if they're expected to contribute pretty significantly. Nick Westbrook-Ikine, like he might be the most productive wide receiver to start the season. That's not exciting. So maybe it's Austin Hooper, probably a lot of Derrick Henry, and then Tyler Conklin there to round it out.
One guy from that situation, since you brought up the Titans, is Kyle Phillips, that I would
Yeah.
consider in that very end of draft, differentiating from other rosters pick. And he is a slot type that's going to need volume to pay off more than big plays. But there's been some early buzz on him. And like you said, there's opportunity for somebody to get targets in an offense where nothing is set heading into the preseason.
All right, Matt, let's take a look at your lineup.
3-5-9-3 was my build, and I would normally, if I take a quarterback earlier than I did Cousins, I would probably stop at 2. I think once I got Cousins as my first, I was thinking Trevor Lawrence could lead. I could stop at 2 with Trevor Lawrence. Once Trevor Lawrence was gone, I knew I was going to take 3, and I always knew Trubisky was a possibility. Hayden Winks did some writing early in the offseason about the upside of taking 3 quarterbacks, even if you have a stud quarterback. So I'm fine with the 3 quarterbacks. I'm always going to hate looking at this roster and seeing Javonte Williams at round 2 because that was my auto pick because I managed to play the clock poorly. There's at least an upside path for him. So I knew that if I have those 2 early running backs, then I'm definitely not going past 5 because I'm expecting those early running backs to pay off for me. So I don't need a whole stable of them. And if they don't pay off, then this team's not going anywhere. I think 9 is pretty typically where I land with wide receiver, unless I happen to start 0 wide receiver or like hero running back where I'm only taking 1 or 0 running backs in the first 6-7 rounds. Then I might stop a little bit short of that. Tight end could have gone either way. I think losing out on some of those Patriots receivers and then seeing Jonnu Smith as a potential differentiator to stack with Mac Jones made it easier to take him as a 3rd tight end there, but we're playing with whether that spot's a 3rd tight end or a 10th wide receiver.
Yeah, that's fair. At that point, it's stacking is interesting, and you mentioned floor, but maybe there's some ceiling weeks from a Freiermuth that could get you over the Hawkinson floor bump. Who knows?
Not a team I'm excited about. So it's okay to look at this team and be like, I don't really like it, because that's what I think about this team. But I think what I take away is that, first of all, we're not going to love all of our teams. If you love every single one of your teams, then you're just like
delusional,
because some of them are going to be bad, even if none of the players get hurt. So what I want to at least do is, if something does go wrong for me in the draft, whether it's auto picking a running back or missing out on somebody that I thought was going to be there, or scrambling and taking a player that I'm not happy about, is how do you then react to that and salvage the roster rather than just saying, screw it, this team's dead, I'm just going to make picks the rest of the way. And so that's what I try to do with like Freiermuth, with the New England stacks. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I felt like I was sniped on a lot of wide receivers I liked in rounds 15 and 14. Like, I wanted Pickens there. I wanted Curtis Samuel. I wanted Peoples Jones. Those are players that I'm targeting in those later rounds, those types of wide receivers who have untapped upside, or upside we've seen before that is being discounted for one reason or another. Like Curtis Samuel, the injuries, Peoples Jones. We've seen Jacoby Brissett nerf most of the wide receivers on his team, but those are the types of players that I've been targeting at the end. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a lot of them. So David Bell, KJ Hamler, and then rounding out with a Cephas pick. So it is what it is.
See where they go. People shouldn't be too excited. People get themselves too excited about late round wide receivers. Take some shots on some guys, see what happens. Look for guys with opportunity or talent, and if they put them both together, then that's the golden ticket.
All right, Matt, leaving us with a golden ticket. Where can we find all of your work? Draft Sharks, and on Twitter at SchaufDS, right?
You got it. DraftSharks.com is where all my stuff will be. We've got the podcast, the video streams, so we go live on YouTube and then load everything so you can find them on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all the places that you find podcasts these days. We've got our big 3 articles coming out. We just had our comeback player come out that we were talking about before the show. That was Cooper Kupp last year. It was not Cooper Kupp this year, but now we've got the early round bust, and then we've got the breakout player coming up. But we're really ramping up the regular season coverage, looking forward to everything. And of course, got the draft war room that I like to get going for all these drafts that I jump into, so I don't make misguided picks and I don't get lost when my turn comes up in round 2.
Javonte Williams will haunt you, but watch, he's the league winner, and you look back on this team like, okay.
Yeah, I won't root for a Melvin Gordon injury, but at least now, if it happens, then I'm in good shape.
All right. Well, thanks. Appreciate it, Matt. You can follow Matt on Twitter, as mentioned before, at SchaufDS, and you can follow me on Twitter as well at FFStalder, bestbellfantasy.com. And I'm almost done with projections. I'll be posting those to the website here shortly. You can follow or click the red subscribe button on YouTube, and you'll get alerts like this. Tomorrow, Andrew Erickson of Fantasy Pros is going to come on. We're going to talk about players to be targeting, the best value of each round. So Andrew and I are going to alternate rounds. We're going to pick the best value or players we are targeting at each round. And then on Friday, Anthony Servino is going to come on, and we're going to talk about the worst values of your fantasy draft, rotating per round. So there's a full slate, and this has actually been bumped from last week. Matt, we were supposed to be on last week, but Baby Stalder made his arrival on Tuesday night and bumped a few things. So I'm glad we were able to reschedule and get you on tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and just publicly congratulations on that baby number 4.
Thanks. We're getting used to it, new normal, and my wife is sending me the text messages. It's getting ready, time for bed. So on behalf of Matt, I'm Bradley, and thanks for tuning in tonight.